Hey guys, today we're working on a 2014 Dodge Journey with a 3.6. It's got a suspected bad alternator. Driving down the road with a new battery, it completely died, started going wonk with all the electronics, and eventually shut off until it had no power. So I'm going to go over step by step how we swapped out the alternator and the results that we got, and as well as all the tools and stuff that we used along the way. Best of luck! Hey guys, I just wanted to go over the tools you're going to need. Standard 3/8" ratchet or other, whatever you prefer. You will need a 10mm, 13mm, and a 15mm. You may also need a 12mm depending on if the alternator comes with a smaller nut for the stud for the electric connection. Mine did, so I used a 12, but you could have reused the old 13 if you wanted to. I didn't care either way. You'll need some type of vice grips, channel locks, pliers, something in order to pinch the hose clamps in order to get the radiator hose off. And then for me, I also used a 13mm ratchet wrench. This made it easier to get the nut off of the stud of the alternator. Again, you could use like a 1/4" ratchet or something to get in there with a 13mm. But I found this to be easy. It broke it loose enough where I could get it off with my fingers. And then for the tensioner, I don't have the tensioner brackets, a tensioner, Slim Jim style thing, so I just used a flex head 3/8" ratchet that was able to get in there. I'll try to go through it step by step with you guys so anybody at home could do this job. Keep in mind this is for more demonstration purposes. Anything you do is on you, but this is a fairly simple job. If I wasn't recording and stopping, I would have had this done in probably an hour, even faster knowing all the tools I need now and that I've done it once before. But best of luck, and follow along for how to get this done. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do on your Dodge Journey before you do any alternator work or any alternator work in general on any vehicle is going to be separating it from power. The way the alternator works, it does have a wire going to it that if you were to arc that to ground, you could easily cause a fire or blow some fuses and cause all kinds of issues. So on this particular vehicle, the battery is located in the wheel well, but you are able to separate power to the alternator by separating or taking the nut off for this. I've already checked, it is a 15mm, so we'll take that off. Be careful when you're taking this off that you don't arc yourself to ground because this is a hot wire. A little tougher than I thought. Let me sit you down. There we go. So again, 15mm, take this off. Once that's off, we'll pull our wires off and set them to the side. Just push them away. We don't want anything getting power. Again, you don't want this stuff to touch the ground. There, that would be the next start. All right, guys, step 2. We're going to take off the passenger side tire. And I will say as a disclaimer, there are other ways you can easily get to the tensioner. Given that I have a lift, I don't really need to take the wheel off. I don't need to take this part off, but I'm assuming most of you at home don't have a lift that can easily get in there. So I'm going to give you the instructions as if I was doing this on the ground. I would get the car jacked up a bit so I could take the passenger side wheel off. We're going to come in here and take off these 2 nuts. They're both 10mm, and then we're going to take off 1 push pin here. Now, the way these work is they're like a 2-piece. There's a little flat end under there, and it's hard to do it with one hand, but you're going to go under there and try to separate it. If it breaks, you can pick these up at the store. You can get the regular Christmas tree ones. But either way, this is the next part we're going to take off. So give me a moment. We'll come right back, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's off, and we'll go over the next step. Hey guys, quick tip. So I had a lot of problems trying to get the pin off. It didn't want to come. But that's okay. If it's loose enough, you should be able to just slide this thing as you move this plastic, as long as you're taking out the top 2 10mm, which go into these like washer things there. But now that this is open, we can clearly see here our tensioner. We're going to be able to get into there with what looks like either a 3/8 or a 1/2" ratchet. So let me see if I can grab that. And I do want to say that if you have like the slim tools, you can use them. Let's see what's going to fit in here. If I have to guess, we're going to have to turn this to the left to get tension off. I'm actually going to put an extension on that, but you can just put the ratchet right in there. I don't have the slim tools with me to get it off easily, so bear with me as I improvise. So this tool might do a little better. Longer arm, and it's got a flexible head. So again, we're going to be putting it on there and turning it to the left so that we can relieve tension on the belt. So I'll show you what I did. I got the ratchet in like I wanted. I turned it to the left, and as I did that, I took my hand from the top of the pulley here, which you can barely see, and just slid it off of it. And I'll have to do that same thing when I put it back on. But now that that's off, and we've got the belt off, we'll do a quick inspection. I was expecting to find a dry rotted belt, but this one's in good shape. I did buy one in case I needed to change it, but seeing as how it looks very new, no dry rot, no cracks, I'm not going to bother replacing it right now. So let's get to the next step. Okay, next step is where things can get a little messy. So we can see that our alternator is right here. It's a little difficult to see, but it is there. We've got our bolt sticking out. Something we're going to want to do is try to take this hose off. That can be a little messy. And if we take a look, we can see it's got the pinch style clamps. So we're going to get in there with a pair of pliers, loosen that clamp off and pull it. Before you do any of that, probably best to get some type of pan underneath of it and make sure you can catch as much as you can. Granted, I'm in a garage. I'm used to, all the mess that comes along with it. But let's get that out. Just in case you guys struggle with this, my tactic with this is that I used vice grips to get in there and bite it enough where they will, it gets onto the clamp, and then I will wiggle the vice grips back and forth. Let me give you a better shot. So right now the clamps are on it, but a lot of time, the vice grips are on it, but the clamps can get a little stuck. So I like to try to wiggle it back and forth and slowly try to pull it off if I can. Because if you pull too hard, the clamp will pop off and you're back where you were a second ago. Yeah, so you can see it's pretty close. I got the hose off. Take a look, the vice grips. This is how I hooked onto the clamp, and then I slowly kept working back and forth until I wiggled it off, and then the hose came off with it. Don't be surprised if they do get stuck on there. Unfortunately, that is what rubber will do on the plastic. It will get stuck. Sometimes it helps if you push the hose in before you pull it off. But this has at least exposed what we need to get to, which you can see. Here's our alternator. It's very difficult, but as we take things off, we can get a little better. The belt is now loose off the alternator, so we can slide that off. And let's write up the next step. Hey guys, next step. We're going to want to undo the electrical connections to the alternator before we start trying to loosen anything else. To do this, you're going to have to take off this little black plastic cap that was over top of this nut. Yeah, it's very simple. It literally just has little push clips on the side. It's difficult to see, but it will pop right off and expose a stud with a nut on there. You can try to get a ratchet in there, but I suggest getting a 13mm ratchet wrench and just getting it on there. Trying to work and show you at the same time. And once it's on there, just little movements to break it loose. Then once it's loose enough, you should be able to just loosen it with your fingers. All right, so we'll take that off. And we also have this clip down here, which unfortunately I keep blocking the light on. Most vehicles, like this one does, has a kind of like a safety catch. So first you have to slide this red part back, and then you can push the clip in. So if you don't have fingernails, you can use instead something like a flathead screwdriver, or I do have a set of picks around here that are all over the place, as I've been doing a lot of odds and ends. At least I think that's a safety lock. Let me see if I can. All right, guys, take two with that. So I was mentioning how we would get off the clip. Get that light a little better in there. So as I thought, this red piece on there, that needs to slide back. So you need to get a screwdriver or something and push the red part back, which will then allow this piece, this gray part, to be pushed in and slid off. And then again, for that stud part on the threading, you'll pop off this plastic cover on it. It's going to expose that. Strongly suggest you just get a 13mm ratchet wrench if you have one. It would be a lot easier, personally to me, than trying to get a ratchet in there. But you could. But if you have a ratchet wrench, you can get it on that stud, break it loose enough where it's going to loosen off, and then you can move on to the next step. Hey guys, so now we're going to the next step. So far we have turned off power to the car, aka the alternator. We took the tire off. We have relieved the pressure on the tensioner to get the belt off, and we have disconnected wires that are connected to the alternator. So the next thing we have to do at this point is to actually unbolt and remove the alternator. I find it best to look at the new part and look at all the bolt locations in case you don't know where they might be. We already know that from the front of the car, we're looking at the car like this because we know where our stud is, we know where our connection is. So we know there's easy to get two bolts right up top. But what I didn't know for sure was where the other bolt is. So I'll be able to look inside the car and try to find this bolt location here to make sure that I can get it off. So let's move on to that. Hey guys, so I took the hose out, and now I can clearly see that bolt from the top, which makes it a lot easier to get to. So if you look down here, you can see this bolt here. I have my finger on. That is the other bolt that must come out with the alternator. So you have 1 bolt, 2 bolt, and then 3 bolt. All easy to get to with a ratchet. They are 13mm. So once you pull those out, this alternator will be ready to come out. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll follow up in a minute. Okay, old one is out, so I am comparing it to the new one. I just line them up side by side. I see it's got same setup, same stud. I'll take a look at the connecting plug to make sure it's the same, and it is. We'll get ready to put this in the car. I will say when I was pulling it out, and I will show you in just a second, it was really difficult to get it to pull out the way I wanted. When I was pulling it out, just so maybe there's only one way to do it, I had the pulley facing down and this stud on this side, and I was able to fit it in between these hoses and pull it out. Everything, all the arms and everything just seemed to line up and come out. It still was a tight squeeze, but I was able to get it out without removing anything else. There, buddy. So we're getting the new one in. I was able to slide it through this hole again to get it in there. Obviously, I'm pushing. I probably could have taken this hose off if I couldn't get through, but again, in this case, I only had to fight with it for about 30 seconds to a minute, and I got it through. The first thing I did was slide one of these bolts in just to hold it. I have everything loose right now. I just got all 3 bolts. I've got the 1 bolt, 2 bolt, and then you can see I've got that one. It's just started. You want to make sure you start these with your fingers. Don't try to go with a ratchet right away or some type of impact, because it's likely this is all aluminum. I don't know for sure, but the way it was feeling when I was loosening, that's what it seemed. And you can easily strip that out and cause a lot more problems for yourself. So be patient, make sure they go in good. I wasn't using any anti-seize, but I encourage you to do so if you think this might be a frequent job. When you put those in, you're going to want to torque to spec. Something else I wanted to mention is while you're sliding this on, you want to make sure that your power, I'm going to call it like a loop, goes over top of your bolt. Now you'll see it has a little like tooth hanging off the edge of it. That shouldn't be just hanging there. That should fit into a groove at the bottom of this stud. So if you see a gap between these two, it's probably not seated right. So make sure you flip it left and right while you do that. We're gonna have to put our nut on there. Most of these starters come with a new one. So be sure that you put the nut on there and tighten it. And then we're also going to need to plug our connector back in. See if I can make it visible for you. So it's going to slide on there, and then after it's on, it's hard to do with one hand, but we'll slide that on, then we'll push that red piece in, and that will lock it in. So I'm going to snug all this up, and then we'll talk about the next step. Everybody. All right, so I have gotten all the bolts tight. I've gotten our wire hooked back up down here with the safety thing back on. If you look here, I've got the stud and nut all tied up with the plastic cover back on it. Something I want to note about the stud and the nut, the original one was a 13 millimeter that came off the OEM alternator. However, I found when I went to tighten this one with the 13 millimeter, it wasn't tightening, and I took a look and found that the new nut is actually a 12. You could reuse the old one. I left the new one on there. It was clean, it was fine. But just note that when I took this off, it was a 13 millimeter. I was using a ratchet wrench. When I did a 12, the tightening it is a new one is 12. And I also used a ratchet wrench to get in there. Again, you can probably get a ratchet in there. It just might be a little tight. And I found using the ratchet wrench was fine. So to follow up, in order to have the complete install of the actual alternator, make sure you've tightened your stud up. You've got your wire clip back on, and you've pushed that red. You can't really see it, but you push that red piece back in so that it locks it in. You have a bolt here, and then you have one far down there, all 13 millimeter. Make sure you talk to them spec. I don't know what spec is. I go by feel. Keep in mind this is likely all aluminum, so you don't want to, put a breaker bar on there and try to tighten these. I've done a bunch of these, so I have a good feel of when I know it's tight. But feel free to look up the specs. If I find it offhand, I'll post it. But otherwise, just be careful. Make sure they're not cross-threaded. And we're going to move on to installing the belt, and I will get the car in the air for that so that I can do that. All right, follow up in a minute. Okay, we are going to get to the point of putting the belt back on. Now, I've started by having the belt already on all the pulleys. The only one it's not on is the tensioner. So what I will do is put my ratchet into the tensioner opening, which is right there. And I will turn it to the left so that I can slide the belt on there. Unfortunately, I didn't see a belt diagram up there. If I see one, I will send it your way. But essentially, it's if you've got too much slack right now, it's probably wrong. But you're just going to put it back on the way it was, and I will show you the finished product. All right, guys, we got it on there. It was a little tough. I had to go up and down. I had a buddy that showed up, and he pretty much popped it on the alternator. If you had a person with you, suggest getting all of the belt on everything except the alternator. And then you'll come down here and with tension, or at least the tensioner, and while they pop it over the alternator. That's the easiest way. The smaller the pulley, the better to pop it over. We've got it on there. I'll make sure when we start it, we just bump it a little bit if we can without starting the car. A little more difficult on push to starts, but okay. So we're gonna move on to putting everything back together. Now that we're done over here, we can slide this piece back on. So I'm gonna do that with the 10 millimeters and stick it all back in. And I'm gonna follow up after I do a few things, but essentially we're just reversing everything that we've done. We've taken everything out, now we gotta put it back in. So it's a little checklist. We're gonna pop this piece back on, put all the screws back in. I have to put the hose back up on the top, and then I have to hook power back up to the actual car. And then we'll be ready to just about start it. So I'll follow up when everything's back in. All right, so we have finished up the job. We've got the new alternator in. Granted, you can barely see it now with the engine cover on. This was a 3.6. We have hooked the power back up here. We have also got the wheel back on, as well as the little splash guard piece that was in there. The belt is on, everything is ready. Our battery was completely dead due to it being driven while the alternator was bad. So we're gonna hook it up and try to give it a start and see if it'll keep running. All right, guys, so I don't know if you can hear, but we've got the car running now. We did have to start, give it some power to get it started. I have since unhooked the jumper cable or the charge box or jump box from the wall, and we just have it sitting here. So we're going to let this run for 10-15 minutes, And we just want to make sure that it can, stay alive on its own power. I may even use it for the drive to take the core back, just to give it a good test run and make sure it charges the battery. Otherwise, I hope these instructions help you out and that you were able to do the job on yourself and save a couple $100. Good luck.